And because at this point I am, yes, still freaking out, I poured the Resincrete in the wrong half of the mould. And boy, was I in a mess and stressed out completely. I needed coffee. Hey, welcome back to my channel. It's Wendy here from Toonpish Crafts, and I hope you're doing okay. You know I love messing around with things when sometimes I didn't even know what I'm doing. Well, I've had a lot of dealings with different types of eco pours. I've tried Brunei, I've tried Magic Pour, and I've tried Resincrete. But I've only tried Resincrete, I think, once, maybe twice. So I'm not really familiar with it. Magic Pour I'm more familiar with. However, I wanted to make a bowl type thing for my bathroom, and it was a huge mould. And the only thing I had was Resincrete. It was about 18 months old. It's old. So I did it. Was it going to work? I don't even know. So at this point, I have old Resincrete, a huge mould, and hopefully a project at the end of it. So I bought this mould from Temu, and they had several different types. I bought about 3 or 4 of them. I thought they were really large, deep, and were going to be great for eco type pours. So that's what I'm going to do. I still have some Resincrete from a very long time ago. I think this is about 18 months old, and it's about time I used it. So I've got some Resincrete, I've got a couple of moulds ready, and I'm going to weigh this small one because I don't think I have enough Resincrete to do the large one, which is really the one I wanted to do. So I'm going to measure out the weight of what I need in the small one, and hopefully I can work out how much Resincrete I need for this one, even though I really wanted to do the large one. So this one is about 190 grams. I have roughly 400 grams in a bag, and I have 2 packets of 300 grams from another box. So what I thought I'd do, because I don't think I've got enough for the large mould, I thought, well, I'll make a dam in the large mould with some hot glue. I've done this before in another video with Magic Pour, and I'll link that in the top right hand corner so that you can see what I'm talking about. I just want a thin dam to stop the Resincrete going into the other half of the mould. And to do that, I'm going to use hot glue. So I'm pouring out some hot glue on an old silicone mat. Now obviously hot glue is really hot, but the silicone mat, bending it over on itself, did provide a cooler surface to push on. And when it's completely cooled down, I have a nice flat surface of hot glue that I can cut to the shape of the mould. So I'm going to trim it up so it's roughly the right size and shape for the mould. I will be sticking it in with more hot glue, but I figured this would be a quicker way to do it and use a lot less hot glue. So I trim until I've got a rough shape. Then I need 2 small bits for the side walls. So I do exactly the same, but with 2 thinner strips. It doesn't take long for it to cool down, but it is nice that by doing it this way, you get a nice flat surface. It's actually important to note here that I'm not letting it really go cold. It's not completely hard. I do want it soft so I can trim it up easier. But I cut it into a rough idea of the mould, and then I can glue the side bits to the top bit once I'm happy with it. And to do that, I've just used another bead of hot glue to stick them both together. When I'm happy with the shape, I pop the hot glue in, hold it down, and there's my dam. Now it is rough, it's definitely a rough dam, so I'm going to fill in the gaps of the dam with the hot glue to completely seal it around the mould. It doesn't affect the mould, this. I've tried it plenty of times and it does not hurt the mould whatsoever. Silicone can take a lot of temperature, and hot glue really isn't that hot for long. and it'll stick nicely to the mould as long as you don't pull it apart until you want it to come out, and then it leaves the mould very nicely back to the original condition. And just FYI here, I plan on putting the Resincrete this side of the dam. So now I've got my mould and my dam, I need to make up the Resincrete, and I'm going to use Homeware Designs Mermaid colour. Now this is where things go completely badly. I haven't made Resincrete for a long time and completely forgot that you don't pour the water into the powder. Not only that, but I've measured it out completely inaccurately. So instead of having the right amount of water, I don't have anywhere near enough. So after trying to get the water dispersed through the powder, I figured I would just pour some water in another jug and add the powder into that water. And if I've got too much, if it's too liquidy, then so be it. At this point, what have I got to lose? I've messed it up completely. I've got to try and salvage this as best as I can. I am panicking like you wouldn't believe because I know I've messed it up. So I'm now pouring this lumpy, damp mixture into unmeasured water, thinking now I've got too much water and not enough powder. So I added the rest of the powder that I had, which was only a little bit of fraction. I really thought at this point that it was all going in the bin because it just would not work. But the mess was real. I had dust everywhere. I was trying hard to mix it fast to get rid of any lumps that was in it. And I knew that was putting bubbles in it, but what could I do? Once I've got it nearly mixed, then I figured, right, got to add the colour because otherwise I'll end up with just white. And I am really freaking out. I didn't have much Resincrete to start with, and now what have I got? Loads. I've got absolutely tons. And because at this point I am, yes, still freaking out, I poured the Resincrete in the wrong half of the mould. I wanted it on the flat side where there was less bumps from the glue, but I started pouring it in there and I thought, you know what, I just have to carry on now. This is going from bad to worse. I then realised that I had way too much made. I'd used the whole amount of Resincrete that I had because I'd worked the measurements out completely wrong. So I needed to grab another mould. And I rummaged through the drawer that was right directly behind me and I found this shell mould. And to be honest with you, it was a lifesaver. Because although it didn't fill the mould up, I thought, well, I can just put resin on top and I'll have a clear bottom on the shell mould. That will work wonders. I didn't think I'd have enough to fill up the big mould to start with. I should have just poured the big mould and probably still had Resincrete left over for the shell or the small mould, which is what I really wanted. It turned out I could have done it, and boy, was I in a mess and stressed out completely. I needed coffee. So, about an hour later, after I'd calmed down and had a couple of cups of coffee, I could demold and see what I'd got. And to my surprise, these pieces hardened beautifully. This small one turned out absolutely beautiful. You know, I didn't even know if this was going to set. I thought, is it actually going to work? When it comes to the big one, I know I poured it on the wrong side. I know that. So all the lumps and the bumps from the hot glue are on the wrong side. So I figured I'll have to take it out and completely cut off or sand down the edge to get a smooth edge. The moulds are fine from the process. I gave them a bit of a wipe with a baby wipe, and I actually give them a little coat with 100% silicone oil and let them sit, and they were fine. So I need to sand down the edge. Now I'm showing you here I'm using 180 grit wet dry sanding paper, just using it dry. I do actually take this out to the garage and use my heavy duty sander and sand down the edge because it was quicker and cleaner, and I got a really nice clean surface out of that. By the way, if you're enjoying this content so far, why not hit that thumbs up button? It'll help YouTube know that you're enjoying it and will push it out to other YouTubers so they can get a chance to watch it too, and it will really help me out. So I put it back into the mould once the mould is nice and clean and shiny again, and I decided to use some plastic on the back of the resin that I'm going to pour. Now this project was getting more complicated by the second, but I wanted to try folding the plastic to get a diamond shaped effect on it so that potentially I could put the diamond shape in the resin when I pour it. A bit like the wave or the water effect on the back, but this time with a diamond effect. This was another experimental thing I was trying out in this video yet again. I don't do things by halves, do I? I should have stopped and just done the water effect, scrumpled it up and done it like that. As the diamonds were a little bit too sharp, I did scrumple it up a little, just to give it a little bit of a different appearance. And I now think I've invented a new word, scrumple. That'll do. When it came to the shell, I was umming and ahhing, do I take it out of the mould, do I just leave it in there? I decided to just leave it in there, but to give the inside a clean because there was splinters of Resincrete and dust in there, so I did give it a good clean out with some cotton buds. So now I get to the resin. I've poured my 2 parts into the large mixing cup, and I'm using the 40-second mixer from Let's Resin with the new paddle that I absolutely love because it's so easy to clean. And it only takes 40 seconds, that's it. You do have to scrape the sides and the bottom of anything that's been mixed in a mixer, however, because you can see that the unmixed resin is on the sides and it leaves little strings where it isn't mixed properly. So you just need to mix that round a little. Once I'm happy it's completely mixed, which doesn't take long at all, I'm going to divide the resin into 3 containers, 2 separate ones and the original one. And I'm going to use some green and blue resin dye from Let's Resin. This blue I know I've used before and it is a striking translucent resin dye, absolutely beautiful. And funnily enough, I'd never used the green before and I was thinking it was going to be as striking. But it really wasn't. The blue outdid itself. The green was really non-existent. But I only wanted a touch in the colour anyway. I've made a dark one, a medium one and a light one. I've put the barrier back into the mould just to try and separate the resin colour to start with. I really want a dark to light mix with the medium obviously in the middle. So I wanted to kind of separate them before I put the medium colour in. I don't really know if that worked, to be honest, but as I had the barrier, I used it. And now I didn't want to fill this mould up completely because I'm putting the plastic on top. And I'm making sure I'm getting rid of any stuck air before I put the plastic on. But I did realise that I wanted the resin to go above the Resincrete so that it would give a better barrier. And the plastic impression would actually come out on that as well. Although it's not going to see it, I did wonder how it would come out. So I made sure that the resin went over the top of the Resincrete before I put the plastic on top. When I was happy, my diamond crumpled design was popped on top of the resin, trying to get out all the air from one end to the other before I let it set and cure up. Now I have only done this a couple of times, but I do remember Claire saying just let the resin take the plastic. Then it was time to get on with the shell, and I also have a piece of plastic ready for that as well. Now I do understand that there's going to be lots of bubbles stuck underneath the lip of this, so I did take my time and get all the air out. I gave it a little squirt of isopropyl alcohol before I put the plastic on top. But when resin is curing, bubbles rise and they will rise up under this plastic. You can't get away from that. That is going to happen. Now, if anything, it would be better to leave it sitting for a while before you put the plastic on. But I just carried on and went for it. Much easier to see the mistakes in hindsight, isn't it? So the following day I can demold this shell, and I actually am really excited to see how this one came out. Now you're going to get overpour because of the plastic. It tends to let the resin go up and over it, and I was trying to get out some air that was rising up from the Resincrete. I stopped after about an hour. I was not going to babysit this anymore, and I figured any bubbles can be sorted out post demold. The mould was a little tricky to get out, to be honest, and I thought the Resincrete would snap, but it held together really well. I've got to say, it is tough stuff. And eventually it came out of the mould, and I absolutely love it. Now it has loads and loads of problems. There are loads of bubbles on the bottom, absolutely tons. The Resincrete and the resin have not mixed well. However, I really like it. I think it looks really cool. Most of the bubbles on the bottom can be filled with UV resin. I just need to take off the tops and fill them. I do love the way the plastic has worked on the bottom and given it a diamond crumpled finish. And after using Magic Pour quite a lot and coming back to Resincrete, Resincrete feels more plasticky and less like China. And I love this mould. I will definitely be using that again. So here comes the demolding of the large one. I have sped it up because this video is getting so long already. It's 15 minutes already. I do appreciate if you're still here, but there's more to come, believe it or not. This mould is really quite on the large side. And although there's a lot of overspill because of the plastic, I tried really hard to get out the bubbles, but there are two big bubbles in the centre, and they have come up from underneath the Resincrete. Once I'd pulled off some of the excess, having a good look at this piece, I do love that diamond effect on the bottom. I think I'm going to have to use that again. I don't particularly like the fact that the resin has gone underneath the Resincrete and not soaked in very well. It's definitely left a ridge. I can fill in the bubbles, that's not a problem. It's the ridge I'm not keen on. I just want to explain here that whenever I've used Magic Pour, which is Let's Resin's Eco Pour, the resin seeps into it and doesn't leave a ridge at all. That is a big difference. But I'm dealing with this project at the moment, so I'm going to cut the outer skin off the bubbles and I'm going to fill these two bubbles up with UV resin, and hopefully they will disappear in front of your eyes. And I do think what I would do is fill the base up with resin to get rid of that ridge, because I really don't like that ridge. So I pop the lamp over it and turn it on for 5 minutes. Okay, so I did not expect this, but I'm going to show you what's going on. I was cleaning up around the outside and I realised that the resin is just peeling off with the Resincrete. It's not sunk into it, it's just coming off. Completely unattached, which makes me wonder whether it's going to come apart. It's just not stuck. This was huge. I had no idea that Resincrete and resin were not compatible in that way. Resin sticks to everything, doesn't it? But then it doesn't stick to some plastics. And I did say this felt less like ceramic and more like plastic. I want to see if it's going to come apart. Right, let's get some heat on this. So I decided to take most of the resin off. So using a heat gun, I was able to get the resin to be quite supple and brittle, and it was popping off of the Resincrete really quite simply. But it did make me concerned about the rigidity of the two pieces. I'm not scraping this, I'm just literally lifting it off. Because it's just peeling off. Look. Just peeling off. I have never known anything like this. This is odd. It was like a case of old sunburn, you know? I mean, it's a pretty gross description, but that's what it felt like. And I didn't want to put you through any more of that, really. But I did want to know one thing. What I want to know, is it going to come apart? Well, there you go. That gave me the answer I really wasn't looking for. But now I know. And so do you. Well, the shell was absolutely beautiful. I did finish this off with wax from Homeware Design, and it feels absolutely beautiful, and I love this. Now, I don't think this one will come apart because it's integrated inside, and I do think it will hold together better than two flat surfaces. This is one of my favourite pieces. The large one obviously never went anywhere. Now the small one is going through a process of being decorated, and I'll show that in a different video because this video is 20 minutes already. I don't want it any longer. The other piece is a whole video on its own. But I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I really hope that you've got something out of this because I learned loads. Thanks so much for watching this. Don't forget to give a thumbs up if you haven't done already. It really does help me out. Have a fantastic week. Happy crafting, and bye for now.